You're telling me these humans play this for fun? Commander Greshk's 4 eyes blinked in disbelief as he watched the Earth broadcast, his mandibles twitching in confusion. Across the room, Officer Felon squirmed in his seat, his antennae nervously vibrating. Yes, Commander. It seems this rugby is a popular sport among them. They call it a game, but it looks more like a primitive form of combat. Greshk leaned closer to the screen, where the humans, these so-called Deathworlders, were engaging in a savage display. Bodies collided with bone-shaking force. The crowd cheered wildly as one human tackled another with what appeared to be absolutely no regard for the survival of their fragile, carbon-based forms. I don't understand, Greshk muttered. They don't even have exoskeletons. How do they not die from this? Felon shifted again, looking increasingly uncomfortable. Commander, the humans claim it builds camaraderie. They even say it promotes team spirit. He pronounced the last phrase as if it were a foreign curse. Greshk snorted, shaking his head. Team spirit? It looks more like a death pact. He turned to face Felon. Why did the High Council approve this? We were supposed to exchange scientific knowledge and cultural understanding with these Deathworlders, not engage in their primitive death rituals. Felon tapped nervously on his datapad, pulling up the official invitation from the Earth delegation. It says here, Commander, that they thought a friendly competition would be the best way to foster positive interspecies relations. They included several suggestions: rugby, football, marathon running. Greshk raised a claw. Wait, what is this football? Is it the same thing? Felon's antennae trembled as he scrolled through the descriptions. Not exactly, Commander. In this version, the objective appears to be kicking a spherical object into a net, but physical contact is still encouraged. Greshk's mandibles clicked in disbelief. Kicking? They use their legs for striking? Are these creatures insane? Before Felon could respond, the door to the command chamber hissed open, and in walked Dr. Nyrex, the chief xenobiologist. Her face was unusually flushed, and her tendrils curled tightly against her head. Commander, I've just finished analyzing the human physiological data, she began breathlessly. And it's worse than we thought. Worse? Greshk's eyes widened. How could it be worse? Nyrex pulled up a holo display, showing a chart of human endurance, strength, and pain tolerance compared to the galactic standard. Their pain threshold is off the charts, Commander, and look at this. She highlighted a section showing the human cardiovascular system. These games push their bodies to the brink of collapse, but somehow they enjoy it. Their hearts even get stronger. Greshk recoiled slightly, his claws tapping anxiously against the console. So you're telling me humans are biologically wired to find pain and exhaustion fun? Nyrex nodded solemnly. Yes, and they call it training. It seems the purpose of these sports is to simulate dangerous, high-stress scenarios in a controlled environment. But to them, it's just another form of recreation. There was a long pause as Greshk processed this disturbing revelation. He finally turned to Felon. What are the rules for this competition? We're not expected to fight them, are we? Felon's antennae quivered again. No, Commander, it's strictly non-lethal. The humans assured us that no one has ever perished in these games. Well, not recently. Greshk's mandibles twitched again. How reassuring. Nyrex cleared her throat. Actually, Commander, it might not be a bad idea to participate. The humans seem to value competition as a means of bonding. And besides, she smiled, revealing her sharp, alien teeth. We are a superior species. If we study their games carefully, we should be able to outmatch them with ease. Greshk hesitated, unsure. He turned back to the screen, where one human player had just been tackled so hard that the ground beneath him cracked. The player stood up, grinning like nothing had happened, while the crowd roared in approval. Superior, Greshk muttered under his breath. Right? Felon chimed in again, trying to sound optimistic. Perhaps we could start with something simpler, Commander. How about marathon running? No physical contact, just endurance. Greshk narrowed his eyes at the suggestion. No physical contact? That sounds more reasonable. He looked to Nyrex. Can our soldiers handle it? Nyrex nodded confidently. Our species has evolved for long distances. We should be able to outlast any human easily. Greshk nodded, feeling a spark of confidence return. All right, then. Inform the humans we accept their challenge. We'll start with this marathon and show them what real endurance looks like. Felon quickly transmitted the response. Message sent, Commander. As Greshk stood, preparing to leave the command chamber, Nyrex glanced at the screen again, where the humans were now celebrating with wild cheers, holding their fists high in the air. Commander, she said softly, do you think we should train before the competition? Greshk waved a claw dismissively. Train? For a simple running event? Don't be absurd, Doctor. We are the Vortexian elite. We don't need to train. Nyrex frowned, but said nothing as Greshk exited the room. Felon, however, looked a little more skeptical. He stared at the holoscreen for a moment, watching the humans as they laughed and shoved each other in the post-game celebration. I hope you're right, Commander, Felon muttered to himself. Because these humans, they look dangerously ready. And with that, the Vortexian delegation was officially locked in for their first encounter with Deathworlder sports. Commander Greshk had never felt so confident in his decision-making. After all, how hard could running possibly be? They were the Vortexians, the most elite species in the galaxy when it came to endurance. Surely a simple foot race would be a breeze compared to the rigorous training their soldiers endured. Are you ready, Commander? Felon asked nervously as they stood on the edge of the starting line, looking out over the track that had been laid out for the competition. Greshk eyed the course. It was a long, winding path that stretched across the human terrain. It didn't seem overly complicated, just some grass, dirt, and a few minor inclines. Of course I'm ready, Greshk said confidently, stretching out his limbs. This is merely a test of endurance. We are designed for long-distance travel. The humans, on the other hand, rely too heavily on brute strength and short bursts of speed. Felon gave a weak nod, his antenna twitching with anxiety. Yes, Commander, but the humans seem rather enthusiastic. Greshk looked at the human runners gathered next to them, warming up for the race. Each one looked relaxed, stretching casually, some even chatting and laughing. There was no tension, no fear, no sign of impending doom. One human even smiled and waved at Greshk, a gesture that made the commander feel slightly unnerved. Enthusiastic is an understatement, Greshk muttered. They seem alarmingly calm, as if they don't realize the level of stamina required for a marathon of this magnitude. Felon cleared his throat, holding up a datapad. Well, Commander, according to the human briefing, the standard marathon is only 42 kilometers. That should be easily manageable for our soldiers. Greshk's mandibles twitched. Only? We traverse planets, Felon. This will be a casual stroll for us. The starting signal sounded, a loud, piercing blast that echoed across the field. The humans immediately took off, their legs pumping at a steady rhythm, and Greshk felt a surge of pride as his team followed suit. For the first few kilometers, everything went exactly as Greshk had expected. The Vortexian runners maintained a calm, steady pace, easily matching the human speed. The scenery blurred by, and Greshk found himself admiring the simplicity of the task. This is hardly a challenge, Greshk said with a smirk, glancing over at Felon, who was running beside him, albeit with slightly more effort. I told you, Felon, we are superior. Felon nodded, though his breath was coming faster now. Yes, Commander. I think we— Oh, what is that? Without warning, a group of humans surged forward, accelerating their pace with ease. Greshk blinked in confusion. They're running? Faster? Felon gasped. That wasn't in the briefing. They're supposed to conserve their energy. Impossible, Greshk snarled, his pride stung. They're wasting their stamina. We'll catch up when they collapse from exhaustion. But the humans didn't collapse. In fact, they seemed to be getting stronger. One by one, the human runners picked up speed, their breathing steady, their expressions focused. Greshk, for the first time, felt a pang of doubt. This isn't right, he muttered. They're running like it's fun for them. Felon, now struggling to keep up, looked panicked. Commander, they're accelerating again. Sure enough, the humans had kicked into yet another gear, widening the gap between themselves and the Vortexians. Greshk pushed harder, his legs burning as he tried to maintain his pace. But no matter how much effort he put in, the humans just kept getting faster, their laughter echoing in the distance. This is insanity, Greshk roared, his pride crumbling as he watched the human pack disappear over the next hill. They're not conserving any energy. How are they still moving? Felon, now panting heavily, could only shake his head in disbelief. I don't know, Commander. But we're losing them. Greshk's legs screamed in protest, but he forced himself to keep going. Sweat poured down his carapace, something that rarely happened even in extreme circumstances. His breathing was labored, and his vision began to blur. Meanwhile, the humans seemed completely unfazed. They were now practically sprinting, their bodies moving with grace and ease that defied all logic. I don't understand, Greshk gasped, his lungs on fire. How can they possibly maintain this pace? Felon stumbled beside him, barely able to respond. They trained for this, Commander. This isn't just a race for them, it's a lifestyle. A lifestyle, Greshk's eyes widened in horror. Who in their right mind would choose to do this? Just then, a human runner passed by them, not even part of the official competition, casually jogging with a grin on his face. Keep it up, fellas. You're doing great, the human shouted, his tone annoyingly friendly. Greshk could barely respond, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Felon, on the verge of collapse, muttered weakly. This was a terrible mistake, Commander. No kidding, Greshk barked between strained breaths. We've been outrun by Deathworlders. By the time they reached the halfway point, Greshk and his team were in complete disarray. Some Vortexians had already dropped out, unable to cope with the sheer stamina the humans were displaying. Greshk, his pride shattered, glanced at the remaining humans up ahead. They were laughing, encouraging each other, and somehow they didn't even look tired. I can't, Felon wheezed, collapsing onto the ground. I can't. Go on, Commander. Greshk staggered to a halt, his legs trembling beneath him. He wanted to scream. He wanted to roar at the injustice of it all. But the truth was undeniable. These maniacs actually enjoy this, he muttered in disbelief. And as the final human crossed the finish line, still smiling and waving at the spectators, Greshk realized the horrifying truth. The humans weren't just surviving the race, they were thriving. The running debacle had done a number on Commander Greshk's pride, but he wasn't ready to give up yet. If humans could endure running, fine. But surely, they couldn't handle a sport like Korvathian strength trials, a brutal game Vortexians had used for centuries to build resilience and raw power. It was a test of sheer might, endurance, and cunning, combining physical challenges with a warrior's mindset. I've heard whispers, Greshk muttered to Felon, that humans dabble in something called wrestling? It seems quaint. But this is real strength. Let's see how they fare when muscles alone won't save them. Felon, still limping slightly from the humiliation of the race, nodded weakly. Yes, Commander. The strength trials will definitely show them the limits of their Deathworld resilience. The arena was a harsh, unforgiving landscape. Sharp rocks jutted from the ground, and the arena's floor was covered in thick, slippery mud, making footing treacherous. Massive boulders were scattered across the field, which competitors had to lift, throw, and stack in a precise sequence. One wrong move, one moment of weakness, and the boulders would collapse on top of you. The Vortexians excelled in these conditions, where a mix of brute strength and mental calculation was necessary to avoid catastrophe. Greshk surveyed the human competitors who had arrived, once again with that annoyingly calm demeanor. They stood casually, chatting among themselves, slapping each other on the back, as if this were a mere playground game. Why are they so relaxed? Greshk hissed. They should be at least concerned about the upcoming pain. Felon squinted at one of the humans who was calmly adjusting a headband. Commander, I overheard one of them saying they've done something called CrossFit. I don't know what it is, but they seemed excited about it. Excited? Greshk snapped, his eyes narrowing. They'll soon learn the meaning of pain. The signal to begin the trial blared across the arena, and the competitors surged forward toward the nearest boulders. The Vortexians were methodical, following the traditional sequence: grip, lift, balance, stack. It was a delicate process, one that took years of training to master. But the humans? They just grabbed the massive rocks and threw them, literally threw them, like they were nothing. What? Greshk bellowed, watching as one particularly large human hurled a boulder halfway across the arena. How is that even possible? Felon, watching in horror, could only mutter, Commander, they're not doing the sequence. I can see that! Greshk roared. The humans weren't following the carefully calculated procedure. Instead, they seemed to be competing in some bizarre freestyle version of the event. One human grunted as he lifted a rock overhead and tossed it onto the pile with ease, while another casually kicked a smaller boulder into place. They were moving with such speed and fluidity that Greshk could barely keep up. "This is chaos," Greshk snarled as he struggled to lift his own boulder, his muscles screaming in protest. "They're ignoring the rules." One of the humans, a woman with an absurd amount of muscle mass, noticed Greshk's struggle. She paused for a moment, grinning. "Need a hand there, big guy?" "What?" Greshk barked, his pride bristling at the offer. "I do not need help." The human shrugged, unbothered. "All right, suit yourself," she said, before hoisting a boulder the size of a small hovercraft over her shoulder and continuing like it was no big deal. Felon, barely able to comprehend what was happening, turned to Greshk with wide eyes. "Commander, I don't think they're taking this seriously." "They'd better start," Greshk growled, struggling to maintain his balance as he heaved a boulder onto the stack. But no matter how hard Greshk and the Vortexians tried, they simply couldn't keep up with the humans' reckless approach. What should have been a grueling trial of endurance had turned into a bizarre display of human enthusiasm. Some of them were even laughing, as if this entire ordeal was some kind of cosmic joke. "How are they still going?" Greshk grunted, his arms trembling under the weight of the next boulder. "They should be slowing down by now." But the humans were only picking up the pace. Greshk watched in disbelief as one human started flipping boulders like they were tires. Another one, in the middle of the field, began clapping between rock lifts, shouting something about PRs and personal bests. "What is wrong with these creatures?" Greshk gasped. Felon, who had all but given up, slumped onto a nearby rock, panting heavily. "Commander, they seem to think this is some sort of recreational activity." Greshk could only stare, his mind racing to comprehend the absurdity of the situation. Recreational? This is supposed to be a trial of strength and endurance. Yet, as the minutes ticked by, the humans showed no sign of fatigue. They lifted, flipped, and hurled boulders with the same unrelenting energy they had at the start. One human even turned to Greshk mid-lift and grinned. "Hey, after this, we should hit the gym, get a real workout in." "What?" Greshk bellowed, but the human was already back to throwing rocks as if nothing had happened. By the time the trial ended, the field was a disaster zone of boulders stacked in every possible configuration, some in neat towers, others in chaotic piles. The humans, however, were standing victorious, chatting excitedly among themselves, high-fiving each other like they had just finished a pleasant afternoon hike. Commander Greshk, drenched in sweat and thoroughly humiliated, could barely process what had just happened. He glared at the humans, his pride wounded beyond repair. "These maniacs," he muttered, his voice weak. "They don't know the meaning of pain." Felon, leaning heavily on a nearby boulder, shook his head in disbelief. "Commander, I think they do. They just enjoy it." Greshk could only groan, rubbing his aching muscles as the humans strolled past, still laughing and joking with each other. This wasn't just survival for them, it was fun. And that realization hurt more than any boulder ever could. Commander Greshk, having faced multiple humiliations at the hands of the humans, was not ready to accept defeat. His resolve was cracking, but not broken. If the individual events weren't enough to crush human spirits, perhaps Vronak's ultimate combat challenge would. It wasn't just about brute strength or agility, it was a brutal team-based event, designed to push both mind and body to the edge of collapse. "Felon," Greshk called, still rubbing his sore muscles. "This time, we'll play on their arrogance. They think they're strong alone. Let's see if they can manage as a team in a real challenge." Felon, still nursing a bruised ego and a bruised everything else, nodded weakly. "The ultimate combat challenge will surely be the end of them, Commander. No human could possibly handle the intensity." Greshk smirked. "And even if they manage the physical aspect, there's no way they'll succeed at the coordination needed to win. Their teamwork is probably chaotic at best." The event arena was even more intimidating than the previous trials. A massive, multi-level structure of ramps, pits, and moving platforms awaited the competitors. Vortexian teams were already practicing their synchronized movements, rehearsing the complex strategies needed to navigate the course, avoid traps, and reach the final goal, an imposing fortress filled with mechanical defenses. The challenge was as much about communication and precision as it was about endurance. This time, Greshk muttered, watching the humans casually enter the arena, they won't be able to muscle through. This requires strategy. Let's see them brute force their way out of this one. The human team, now familiar faces to Greshk, though he resented every one of them, approached the event with their typical nonchalance. They stretched, cracked jokes, and seemed utterly unbothered by the looming structure of pain in front of them. "What's the plan, guys?" one of them asked, casually tying his shoelaces. We'll figure it out as we go," another replied with a grin. "Figure it out as you go," Greshk nearly choked. "They're supposed to be coordinating. They'll fail if they don't." The signal blared, and the teams were off. The Vortexians immediately fell into formation, executing their perfectly rehearsed strategy. They moved as one, communicating through subtle gestures and short commands. It was a dance of precision, a display of military discipline honed over generations. And then there were the humans. Chaos. Absolute chaos. Instead of forming a cohesive unit, they scattered across the arena, yelling random ideas at each other. "Hey, watch out for that pit! I got this! I got this! Wait, is that a rope swing? Awesome!" They were all over the place. One was climbing a ramp that led nowhere, another was attempting to leap across a chasm with no apparent plan, and a third was laughing hysterically while dodging mechanical traps as if it was some kind of carnival game. Greshk could only gape in disbelief. This is insanity. They're running around like maniacs. They have no plan. They'll never reach the fortress like this. Yet somehow, despite their lack of strategy, the humans began to make progress. Their individual strength and absurd agility allowed them to bypass traps that would normally require teamwork. Where a Vortexian team would carefully navigate a balance beam, the humans simply jumped across, sometimes assisting each other with ridiculous stunts that defied logic. One human was hanging from a swinging platform, laughing as he shouted, "This is just like American Ninja Warrior." "What in the galaxies is a Ninja Warrior?" Felon muttered, watching in horror. Another human, already covered in mud and scrapes, was busy throwing rocks at the mechanical defenses guarding the fortress. "Hey, guys, watch this! I think I can break this one!" Greshk clutched his head in frustration. That's not how the challenge works. They're supposed to deactivate the defenses, not brute force them. Yet as the minutes ticked by, the humans, through sheer audacity, managed to bypass the challenges one by one. It was a mess. It was reckless. It was absurd. But it was working. "They're cheating," Greshk bellowed, though deep down he knew that wasn't true. The humans weren't cheating, they were just improvising. Something about the way they tackled problems didn't follow conventional logic. It was as if they didn't believe in limits. One human, seemingly fed up with the labyrinth of puzzles inside the fortress, turned to his team and said, "You know what? Let's just stack ourselves." "Stack ourselves," Felon repeated, utterly baffled. "Yeah," the human continued, gathering his comrades. "You guys stand on each other's shoulders, and I'll just climb over the stupid wall. Easy." What? Greshk's eye twitched. That wall is impenetrable by design. But sure enough, the humans had formed a bizarre human tower, and the topmost one leaped over the fortress wall with a triumphant shout. "Whoa, I made it!" Greshk stared, his fists trembling. This is insanity. They're laughing their way through a challenge that took us decades to perfect. Felon, at this point too tired to even react, sighed. "Commander, they don't seem to understand the concept of giving up. Or maybe, they just don't care about the rules." As the humans finished the event, completely out of breath but grinning from ear to ear, they gathered in the center of the arena, high-fiving and joking as if they had just completed a fun obstacle course, not the most grueling team sport in the galaxy. "I told you guys we'd crush it," one human shouted. Another laughed. "Yeah, who needs strategy when you've got this much energy?" Commander Greshk, standing in the shadows of the arena, watched the humans celebrate their victory. His mind was racing, trying to understand how such chaotic, uncoordinated creatures could dominate an event that required discipline and precision. "They shouldn't have been able to do that," he muttered, more to himself than to Felon. "They didn't even follow the rules." Felon, shaking his head in disbelief, muttered, "Commander, I don't think they ever do." Greshk didn't respond. He simply watched, a strange mixture of awe and frustration building within him. The humans had once again done the impossible, and they'd enjoyed every second of it. By now, the Vortexian command staff was utterly defeated in spirit, if not in body. Every carefully planned challenge had been met with the same infuriating result. The humans had steamrolled through them with nothing but sheer audacity and reckless abandon. Commander Greshk, once so confident that the Deathworlders would meet their match, now found himself questioning not only his understanding of human biology, but of reality itself. Still, there was one final event, the most difficult and dangerous of all. "Commander," Felon said cautiously, "I don't think we should continue. The humans have, clearly exceeded our expectations." Greshk's eyes twitched as he stared at the final event list. His pride wouldn't let him surrender. "No, we can't stop now. If they've survived everything so far, then surely this will break them." The final challenge was simply labeled the Gauntlet, a name that struck fear into the hearts of even the most hardened Vortexian warriors. It wasn't just a sport, it was a rite of passage for the most elite soldiers in the galaxy. The rules were simple. Navigate through a series of death traps, avoid projectiles, survive hazardous environments, and reach the other side. Unlike the previous events, there would be no breaks, no shortcuts, no mercy. Greshk stood before the human team, his expression one of cold determination. He wasn't going to show them any doubt, even if his mind was a whirlwind of panic. "This," he said, waving toward the nightmarish course that lay ahead, "is the Gauntlet. It has claimed the lives of some of the strongest warriors in the universe. No one has ever completed it on their first try. No one." One of the humans scratched his head, squinting at the treacherous obstacles ahead. "Huh, looks like something out of a video game." "I know, right?" another replied. "Reminds me of that one level in Megadeth Zone X." Greshk stiffened. "This is not a game." He pointed toward the shifting platforms, the laser turrets, and the sea of electrified spikes. "This is designed to break you. It requires skill, endurance, and the ability to work together as a team. One wrong move and you could— Yeah, one of the humans interrupted, yawning. "We got it. Survive, don't get fried by the lasers, dodge the death spikes. Classic stuff." Commander Greshk clenched his fists. "You don't seem to understand. This is the most dangerous trial yet. If you fail—" "We'll do fine," the humans replied in unison, their casual tone causing Greshk's blood pressure to spike. The starting signal blared, and the humans, much to Greshk's horror, once again ran straight into the chaos without a plan. While the Vortexians would have taken time to carefully coordinate their movements, the humans charged forward, dodging death traps like it was a casual stroll through the park. "Look out for the flamethrowers!" one human shouted, grinning ear to ear. "What flamethrowers?" "Those flamethrowers!" As fire spouted from hidden alcoves, the humans danced through them with a mix of luck and sheer reflexes. Laser turrets locked onto their movements, but instead of panicking, one of the humans began to laugh maniacally, weaving between the beams like it was some kind of joke. Felon, standing beside Greshk, could barely speak. They're treating this like a joke. "Commander, I see it, Felon." Greshk snapped, his eyes wide with disbelief. The humans were unstoppable. One by one, they jumped over bottomless pits, swung from cables that barely held their weight, and dodged obstacles that should have been impossible to avoid. At one point, a massive spiked pendulum swung down from above, and instead of running, one human yelled, "Check this out," before backflipping over it. "What are they doing?" Greshk shouted, pulling at his hair. "That's not how you handle this course." But somehow, against all reason and probability, the humans didn't just handle the course. They were having fun. By the halfway point, they were laughing, shouting words of encouragement, and treating the death-defying traps as if they were nothing more than inconveniences. One human, dodging a barrage of projectiles, shouted, "Guys, I think I found a shortcut." The rest of the team immediately followed, abandoning any pretense of following the designed path. "There's no shortcut," Greshk screamed. "The course is linear. It's designed that way." "Well," the human shouted back, "maybe someone should have told the wall that, because I just went through it." Sure enough, the human had found a weak point in the arena's structure and had punched a hole straight through. They bypassed several of the most dangerous sections entirely, emerging on the other side with smug grins. By the time the humans reached the end of the gauntlet, They were bruised, singed, and utterly exhausted, but victorious. They collapsed in a heap, laughing and exchanging high fives, completely oblivious to the shocked expressions of the Vortexians watching from the sidelines. Greshk's jaw hung open. He couldn't believe it. No one had ever completed the gauntlet in such a reckless manner, and certainly not on their first attempt. He stumbled forward, approaching the humans as they lay sprawled out on the floor, grinning like madmen. "You," Greshk stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "You completed the gauntlet." One of the humans, wiping sweat from his forehead, looked up and grinned. "That was awesome! You guys should turn that into a reality show." Reality show? Greshk's brain felt like it was melting. He could barely process what he had witnessed. Felon, standing beside him, sighed deeply. "Commander, I think we've learned something important today." Greshk turned to his second-in-command, eyes wide. "What's that?" Felon looked at the humans, still laughing, still victorious, and shook his head slowly. To them, this wasn't a survival challenge. It wasn't a test of endurance or strength or teamwork. "Then what was it?" Greshk demanded, still reeling from the humiliation. Felon chuckled, a rare sound from the normally stern officer. "To them, Commander, it was just a game." Greshk opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He stared at the humans, who had already started to chat about where they could find some food. His mind raced, trying to comprehend what had just transpired. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke, his voice hollow. I don't understand." One of the humans overheard and turned to Greshk with a wide grin. "Oh, don't worry, Commander. We'll explain later. Right now, though, we're starving. Got any good food around here?" As the humans walked away, still joking and laughing, Greshk and Felon remained standing in stunned silence. The galaxy's most feared and deadly sport, a test that had broken countless warriors, had been turned into a joke. And the humans? They hadn't just survived. They had enjoyed it. Greshk shook his head, a small smile of disbelief creeping across his face. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "Absolutely unbelievable."